Hello and welcome, my name is Rednew. In my Sky Strikers guide, I asked if you all would like a gameplay commentary video for Sky Strikers, so here it is. I recorded a lot of gameplay and picked this game specifically because I think it goes over a lot of nice concepts for newer players, shows that you can handle some misplays, and is a pretty even match. In this video, I play a game versus Shaddolls during my climb to Platinum 1, which, by the way, during recording, I was able to yet again achieve. Let's not waste any time. First, I'll cover the changes I made to my deck, while not going too in-depth since the subject of the video is the gameplay commentary. Then, we will jump straight into the gameplay. We have cut Rows to 1, Area 0 to 1, Terraforming is out, MSTs are out, Desires to 2, and Lightning Storm to 1. In its place, we have included 1 Nibiru, 2 Upstarts, a couple of Droplets, and 2 Infinites. I've made these changes directly in response to not seeing nearly as much Eldritch as I did last season. I will always change my deck around in order to give myself the best shot at beating the majority of the decks I see. And with a more diverse meta, I've opted to put in a lot more monster effect negation in the form of Droplets and Infinite Impermanence. With less consistency in starter cards because I cut Rows, Terraforming, Area 0, and the Mystical Space Typhoons used to destroy Area 0, I compensated with the Upstart Goblins, which allow us to draw a single card. Since they are also spells, they help fuel our 3 spells in grave condition so that we can use our bonus effects. Nibiru is at 1 because it is a great card to draw into with Max C and to stop the opponent from comboing on their turn. Why we don't play 3 is because Nibiru occupies a main monster zone and totally disables our Sky Striker spells. And it's not always easy to stop it from doing that. That's it for the deck. Let's get into the game. Alright, so let's pause here. With Shadoll Fusion being played, let's briefly cover what our opponent is playing. This is Shaddolls. They are a fusion-themed archetype centered around graveyard interactions. They are a very efficient archetype. Most of their boss monsters will float back resources when they die, and they are also able to use monsters in their deck as fusion material. The largest obstacle by far we're going to run into is Shadoll Winda. She is a floodgate on legs. A floodgate is any card that can heavily restrict you from making your best plays, like Skill Drain. But since she is a monster and not a spell or trap, we say that she is a floodgate on legs. Winda prevents both players from being able to special summon more than once per turn. This is very restrictive, and on top of this, she cannot be destroyed by card effects. The common ways to remove her include banishing her and by attacking her with a stronger monster. However, since we can only special summon once per turn, this makes it difficult for many decks to remove her. Thankfully, Sky Strikers have the tools to handle Winda. Our trump card here is going to be Widow Anchor, which can negate Winda's effects and steal her if we have 3 spells in grave. Because Shaddolls is such an efficient archetype, this is going to be a very grindy game where we compete to keep as many resources as possible. Let's speed up his first turn. On the first turn, unfortunately we have 0 interaction in our hand, but thankfully he doesn't seem to have the best start. After drawing by sending Beast to the graveyard, he is able to recycle Schism by link summoning his construct into Gravity Controller. He ends his turn with Gravity Controller and a set card we assume to be Schism. Shaddolls Schism is going to be our opponent's way of getting Winda on board during our turn. My thoughts going into this is to play multi-roll first so I can encore whatever I use after. Then hit his set card with Jamming Waves, pack my graveyard with Upstart, and banish a dark monster from his graveyard using Shark Cannon. This gets me to my triple spells in grave condition, so I can reap the bonus effects of Widow Anchor if he is able to special summon a threat. In hindsight, it was definitely more important to start my play with Jamming Waves to ensure Schism would be destroyed. It's a small misplay for now. He will still get Winda on the board regardless since he can chain onto it, but it would prevent him from using Schism multiple times throughout this game. On my multi-roll activation, he activates Schism. I thought he could only use materials from the graveyard, so I changed Shark Cannon to banish the only dark monster there, knowing Winda needs a dark monster as material. Unfortunately, I didn't read that they can also use materials on the field, which he already has in Gravity Controller. That said, it is still a good move because it forces him to use the Gravity Controller on the field. My plans are set back a bit. Since Schism is no longer face down, I can no longer use jamming waves on it. I would instead have to hit one of my own set cards if I wanted it to feel my grave. Now I have Winda to deal with. With Shark Cannon as my lone spell in the grave, I decide to use Upstart Goblin to draw me a card. In the worst case I don't draw a spell to use, I can still send jamming waves to grave using multi-roll's effect. It's important to have a backup plan, and you always want to be thinking about how you can get 3 spells in grave at the start. Luckily I drew another Upstart Goblin, allowing me to save my jamming waves and put 3 spells in the grave. Now I can handle Winda with Widow Anchor. I snatch her, and with Ray in hand, I will be able to link summon using Winda as material to remove her from the board. Our opponent knows this, and upon our normal summon with Ray, he drops Max C, guaranteeing him a card if I wanted to remove Winda, and another if I want to go into Shizuku at the end of my turn. You'll see here that I don't double attack with Ray, which is a slight misplay. I thought I could only special summon once per turn due to Winda's effect, but forgot, I negated her effect with Widow Anchor. That said, I still need to remove her, and opt to link summon Zeke using her as material. This is another misplay though, as I could have just sent her to grave using multi-roll's effect. With Winda now off the board, we will be able to go into Shizuku to search Engage, and set the Widow Anchor we used earlier to protect her. So here, we try to chain our Max C onto a Shaddoll fusion, hopefully to get a card. Unfortunately, I think he drops an Ash Blossom here. And this is going to allow him to special summon a fusion monster using materials from his deck, because that's what Shaddoll players can do with Shaddoll Fusion, as long as you control an extra deck monster, which usually you are going to have an extra deck monster. He sends Re-Shaddoll Wendy and Squamata to the graveyard, and he'll be able to get the effects off of that too. Squamata will allow him to send one Shaddoll monster from deck to graveyard, and Wendy will allow him to summon one Shaddoll monster from his deck in face-up or face-down defense. Here, he uses Called by the Grave to try and banish our Ray, which is going to leave our board a lot weaker, because now our Shizuku will not be able to float into Ray. Then he chains his Schism. And this is the misplay I was talking about. If we had started our play with jamming waves earlier, he would not be able to get an essential free fusion summon with Al Capone here. It's important to point out that maybe he did a little misplay here. Because he summoned Winda first, he actually could not get the special summon from Re-Shaddoll Windy. Unfortunately, here I'm reading the card, but essentially what he's doing is he's negating my Shizuku's effect. And as well, he will be able to get the Shaddoll Hedgehog's Send to Graveyard effect, searching him Nail Shaddoll Aerial, I think it's called. So now, since he called by the grave our Ray earlier, our Shizuku just gets sent to the graveyard by battle. We are not going to be able to float back into Ray, and we don't have a monster. This is a very good important note to have if you're playing against Sky Striker players. If you can get rid of the Ray in their graveyard, that's always going to be an obstacle for them. And on top of that, since he used Call by the Grave, we will not be able to use our Ray's quick effect on our turn, since Call by the Grave negates the activated effects of every monster that shares the name with the monster it banished until the end of the opponent's next turn. So we start our playoff with Engage to search whatever we're missing. In this case, we're missing a starter card. He activates Schism. So he's got 2 special summons off Schism that we could have prevented so far. This is going to be Winda. So he's doubling up on Winda. And this is difficult for a lot of decks to deal with, but we have a good way to deal with it, as you'll see later. So our plan here is to snatch his Winda and run it into the other Winda, removing both of them off the board. I normal summon Ray here, and he drops a Max C in response. This is always a safe move versus Sky Striker players. Even if I can chain on and special summon without him getting a draw from the Max C, it's still a good move. So here I remove both windows like I planned. I normal summoned Ray earlier because I thought maybe I would attack the set card. I didn't really read what Ariel did. If I had attacked her, she would be able to special summon a banished Shadoll monster. And he has Winda in his banished zone from earlier. He was able to use Winda as material to special summon Al Capone. So it's a good thing we didn't attack Ariel there. Now from here, I'm able to go into my plays. I go first into Kagari to recycle the engage from my graveyard. And I can do so pretty safely because he has no back row. And it's important to note here that I am deciding to go into Kagari. And some people would not because they are put under max C. If I go into Kagari, then Shizuku, he's going to draw 2 cards, right? But because I'm recycling engage and because I have Pot of Avarice in hand, I know I can see 4 new cards, 4 fresh cards compared to his 2. So I'm already winning in that regard. And I get lucky here, I draw Pot of Desires off that engage, allowing me to save my Pot of Avarice here. Because now I have pretty much everything I need. I drew Afterburners from that Desires. That's going to let me get rid of Al Capone here and Schism. Also, by the way, I searched the Widow Anchor on the previous engage because I wanted to protect my board and also be able to steal their monster if I needed to. Al Capone, whenever he's sent to the graveyard, he gets to shuffle back a Shadoll card from his graveyard back into his hand. He decides instead to shuffle Al Capone back into the extra deck, so he's able to use it later. Here, I go into Shizuku like I planned. So again, this is giving him that second card, right? 2 cards versus the 4 I drew with Desires and Engage. And with the cards that I drew off Engage and Pot of Desires, it allowed me to handle his board. It allowed me to double up on effect negation by searching out the Widow Anchor. So even if you're put under pressure of max C, it's important to kind of plot out how many cards are you going to get versus them, right? And I stood to profit a lot more than he does, right? I get to set Engage back for the next turn. I get to also get Shark Cannon back so that I have plays next turn. And I get to find another card with Shizuku at the end. So that's already 5 cards, right? 7 if you count the 2 set by multi-roll. Let's pause here for a bit because it's important to emphasize just the number of cards I was able to get versus the number of cards he got by using Max C. Regardless of whatever I would draw, the recycled Engage got me Widow Anchor for defense and another card. This is a net positive by 1 card, or what we like to call a +1. Desires gave me a +1. Using the recycled Engage with multi-roll active allowed me to encore an additional card. Since I end my turn with Shizuku, I also get another card. That is 4 cards as a net positive for doing my play, versus my opponent who had to drop Max C as cost to draw 2, giving him a net positive of 1. This is an application of card advantage. It is very important to keep in mind when playing Yu-Gi-Oh! That if you have good cards in your deck, it rarely matters what exactly you draw. What really matters is what you stand to gain, what number of cards you are able to receive. Let's speed up play here. And he's going to go through his turn. He sets a card. He flip summons Ariel. We do have effect negation to stop him. He wanted to special summon Winda if you saw. We opt to use Infinite Impermanence here and not Widow Anchor because Widow Anchor has more ways to be used than Infinite. Here he activates Shadoll Fusion. We drop the Max C so we can get a card from it. Since we control an extra deck monster, he's able to use monsters from his deck as material. He uses Ariel and Beast to make Al Capone. And what he's going to get is a draw off Beast. We could have Ash Blossomed this. This is not the right play because the card that he draws is not very likely to enable his plays. What is likely to enable his plays is the Alistair we see here. He's going to try and search Invocation, right? Which is a fusion spell, which will allow him to get a boss monster like Makaba out. And Makaba is just not really easy to deal with because he is an Omni Negate, which basically means he's able to negate monster effects, spell effects, and trap effects. so long as he's able to, discard a card of the same type. Here, he moves to attack our Shizuku, which is totally fine. We have Ray from last turn in our grave. Here he link summons using Ariel and Alistar's material, getting himself Plat Anaconda. Anaconda is going to allow him to pay 2,000 life points, then dump a fusion or polymerization spell from his deck to the graveyard and copy its effects. This is kind of scary because what he dumps here is super polymerization, which allows him to fusion summon a monster using our monsters as material. Thankfully, since it's a monster effect, because it's Anaconda copying the effect, we are able to respond. We take Ray off our board, so now we are able to use Widow Anchor to negate his effects. And we go ahead and steal the monster too, as you'll see, because we don't want him to tribute off or fusion summon with or link summon with Al Capone, for instance, with the Anaconda. So just take it off his board, put it on ours. At the end of the turn, it will go back to him, but that's fine. With nothing left to do, he goes ahead to the end phase. We are able to use our multi-roll effect to get whatever we want. I think we opt here to get Widow Anchor because we want to steal his Al Capone for damage. We're also able to activate Shizuku because this is a new turn. This is still his turn that we summon Shizuku with Ray's quick effect. And since we special summoned her this turn, it's the end phase, we're able to search a card. Here we draw Ash Blossom. And from here, it's just a matter of making a series of plays that have the least amount of commitment. Because yeah, I can start my play with Jamming Waves, but I have Engage set. I'm going to activate it here. I have another Engage in hand. I have way more starter cards. I have way more cards in general so that I don't have to destroy his things. He can just activate it and I can react, and that's pretty much the same way as destroying it. If I'm just stuffing and minimizing his effect that he has on me, that's another like pseudo way of removal. This is an important idea with regards to card advantage, right? Because if we're looking at every card like as equal, let's just say, like if we're both playing really good cards, really good decks, our cards should be equal in value relatively, right? So card for card, if I have more cards than him, it's just so much more likely I'm going to win. So what happens here is we activate our Ray from the grave to try and special summon herself. Because he used Dogmatica Punishment earlier and sent Knits from extra deck to graveyard, she activates in the grave to try and destroy a card on our board. He targeted multi-roll. And he chains Call by the Grave just to banish our Ray so that we don't get Ray from the grave, which is fine. That is great. But again, just look at how many more cards I have than him. It's just so much more likely that I'm going to be able to recover and stuff whatever he's doing and proceed with whatever I want to do, which is to end the game and win. So let's go ahead and close out this game. We're going to activate multi-roll because what we're going to do is we're going to activate Area 0 and send it to the graveyard with multi-roll's effect. And this is going to let us special summon Ray from our deck. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to set our desires because we're not going to use desires. I don't want to lose the game, right? I don't think I can even. I'm going to use Jamming Waves to destroy my Pot of Desires. And this will let me get the bonus effect of destroying a monster, which I'll destroy Plat Anaconda, because I only have one way to steal his monster, and that's Widow Anchor. I don't need Anaconda on the board. I go ahead and activate multi-roll here, send the Area 0 to the grave, again to special summon the Ray from my deck. And from here, we are going to have to chain because Ray is going to be occupying a main monster zone, which will not allow me, or rather disallow me, from using my Sky Striker spell. So I'm going to use everything. I'm going to use my Widow Anchor to steal his Al Capone. I'm going to use Shark Cannon to take Ash Blossom from his grave. I like Ash Blossom because Ash Blossom is a tuner, and that's going to let me go into, Hauki, Celine, whatever. Basically, link all the way to access Kotok. And we cover how to do the Access Code Talker combo in my Sky Strikers guide, so go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. You should see here that I have more than enough damage on board if I go into Talker, so I'm going to use this time here for an outro. I want to first thank you guys so much for watching my previous video. I never imagined for it to pop off as much as it did. If you look at my channel, I have other videos that are still sitting at the bottom. They didn't do nearly as well. I was ecstatic when my previous Sky Strikers guide got to 100 views. And now at time of recording, we're sitting at over 12,000 views on it, hundreds of likes, and so many positive and supporting comments. We went from 11 subscribers on the day before to 188 subscribers now. And I can't thank you guys enough. I'm going to try and take this as far as I can go. I know that with Master Duel, there are a lot of new players, and I want to make videos with that in mind because I know a majority of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Content you see out there are just not made for new players. When you look at a deck profile, they say they play 3 of this card or 2 of that card, and their reasoning is usually, yeah, y'all know what this card does, that's why we play 3. But new players don't know why. And I get why they do it because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a very wordy game with so many rules and so many stipulations. But despite all that, it's still a lot of fun. And it can be a lot of fun for new players too if there was someone out there who thought of them. So I hope this was helpful to you. I'm far from perfect. I can't predict every question that comes from a new player. And on top of that, during editing, all the misplays I happen to catch, I'm not trying to present myself as a professional or a hardcore player. I just like Yu-Gi-Oh! And I want to help other people also like Yu-Gi-Oh! As much as I do. So please leave a comment if you think I glossed over something because that's something I really don't want to do. Like this video if you learned something new and subscribe for more Master Duel content. I want to hit 500 subs by the end of this month. I hope that I can do that so I can make community posts and get your guys' feedback and poll you for what kind of content you'd like to see. I think that would be good. So, my name's Renu. Thank you guys so much for watching again, and I hope you have a great day.